I bought a lake to escape the city, but the HOA wanted it all, until I discovered I controlled their docks and their secrets. The sun hung low over Lake Serenity, casting a golden shimmer across its glassy surface. I stood on the porch of my new home, a quaint two-story cabin nestled among towering pines, breathing in the crisp air. After years of city noise and cramped apartments, this place was a dream, a secluded haven I'd scrimped and saved to buy. The lake, bordered by my property on 3 sides, was the crown jewel. I imagined quiet mornings with coffee, maybe even a small boat. But dreams, as I'd soon learn, have a way of attracting complications. I'd barely unpacked my first box when a rumble of tires on gravel snapped me out of my reverie. A sleek black SUV pulled up, followed by a golf cart of all things, both adorned with the emblem of the Serenity Shores Homeowners Association. 3 people stepped out, a man in a crisp blazer with a clipboard, a woman with a perm so tight it looked like it was holding her face together, and a younger guy who seemed to be there just to glare. They marched toward my porch like they owned it. "Elliot Carter," the blazer man barked, not waiting for a reply. "I'm Richard Hensley, president of the Serenity Shores HOA. This is Marjorie Klein, treasurer, and Trevor, our compliance officer. We need to discuss your lake." I blinked, setting down the box of kitchenware I'd been holding. "My lake?" "Yes," Marjorie snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Lake Serenity is under HOA jurisdiction. You'll need to sign these usage agreements and pay the maintenance fees immediately." I glanced at the lake, its calm waters mocking the tension brewing on my lawn. "I'm sorry, what?" "I just moved in yesterday. The deed says the lake is part of my property." Richard's smile was all teeth, no warmth. "The deed may say that, but the HOA has managed this lake for decades. It's a community asset. You can't just claim it." Trevor, the compliance guy, crossed his arms, his biceps straining against his polo shirt. "We've got docks, boats, and a whole system in place. You don't get to waltz in and disrupt it." I felt my hackles rise. I'd dealt with pushy landlords before, but this was next-level audacity. "Look, I don't know what you're talking about, but I own this land and the lake. If you've got docks on it, that's your problem, not mine." Marjorie's face reddened. "You'll regret that attitude, Mr. Carter. The HOA has ways of ensuring compliance." Before I could respond, they turned and left, the SUV and golf cart kicking up dust as they sped off. I stood there, dumbfounded, the peace of my new home already shattered. Something told me this wasn't the last I'd hear from them. That night, I dug through the stack of documents from the home purchase. The deed was clear. The lake and surrounding land were mine. No mention of any HOA oversight. But there was something else, a faded map tucked into the folder, showing my property lines extending to a strip of land on the lake's far side, where the community docks were located. I frowned, rereading the fine print. The docks, used by the entire Serenity Shores neighborhood, were on my land. The HOA didn't just want my lake. They were operating on my property without permission. I leaned back in my chair, a slow grin spreading across my face. They thought they could bully me into submission, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. I wasn't just some city slicker looking for a quiet retreat. I'd grown up scrapping for everything I had, and I wasn't about to let a bunch of clipboard-wielding busybodies take what was mine. The next morning, I decided to do some recon. I drove to the community docks, a well-maintained setup with sleek boats bobbing in the water. A sign read, "Serenity Shores, HOA members only." I parked and walked down, noting the pristine condition of the docks. Clearly someone was footing the bill for upkeep. A man in a polo shirt, not unlike Trevor's, was hosing down a boat. He eyed me warily. "You new around here?" he asked, shutting off the hose. "Yeah, just moved in," I said, keeping my tone friendly. "Nice docks. HOA takes good care of them, huh?" He snorted. "They better with the fees we pay. Name's Dave, by the way. You joining the HOA?" "Not exactly," I said, studying the docks. "Just getting to know the neighborhood." Dave shrugged and went back to his boat, but I could feel his eyes on me as I walked away. The docks were bustling, with residents chatting and kids fishing off the edge. This was clearly the heart of the community, and it was on my land. The HOA hadn't just overstepped. They'd built their entire lakeside lifestyle on property they didn't own. Back home, I called my lawyer, Sarah, who'd helped me with the purchase. "Elliot, this is gold," she said after I explained the situation. "The HOA has no legal claim to your lake or the docks. If they're using your land without a lease or easement, you've got them over a barrel. So what's my next move?" I asked, pacing my living room. "Send them a formal letter asserting your ownership and demanding they vacate the docks or negotiate a lease. If they push back, we can escalate. But Elliot, be careful. HOAs can be vindictive." I hung up, my mind racing. This wasn't just about the lake anymore. It was about power. The HOA thought they could steamroll me, but they were about to learn I wasn't backing down. I drafted the letter that night, keeping it polite but firm, and mailed it to the HOA's office. Then I waited. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived, its tone dripping with condescension. The HOA claimed historical precedent for their use of the lake and docks, dismissing my ownership as a technicality. They demanded a meeting to resolve the misunderstanding and included a list of rules I was expected to follow as a new member of the community. I laughed out loud. They still didn't get it. I owned the docks they cherished, the ones their fancy boats were tied to. If they wanted to fight, I'd give them one they wouldn't forget. The meeting was set for the following Saturday at the Serenity Shores Community Center, a gleaming building with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. My lake, I reminded myself. I arrived early, dressed in jeans and a flannel shirt, a deliberate contrast to the HOA's polished image. The room was packed with residents, some curious, others openly hostile. Richard, Marjorie, and Trevor sat a long table up front, looking like a tribunal ready to pass judgment. Richard opened the meeting with a smug smile. "Mr. Carter, we're here to clarify your role in our community. Serenity Shores has maintained Lake Serenity for decades, and your attempt to claim it is causing unnecessary tension." I stood, holding up a copy of my deed. "Let's get one thing straight. I own the lake and the land under your docks. I'm not claiming anything. It's mine. If you want to keep using those docks, we need to talk terms." The room erupted in murmurs. A woman in the front row, her pearls practically choking her, shouted, "You can't just take our docks. We've used them for years." "Exactly," I said, keeping my voice calm. "You've used my property for years without permission. I'm not here to take anything away. I'm here to set things right." Marjorie slammed her hand on the table. "This is outrageous. The HOA has a legal easement." I pulled out the map from my deed and held it up. "No, you don't. I've had my lawyer review everything. There's no easement, no lease, nothing. Your docks are on my land, and I could have them removed tomorrow if I wanted." The crowd gasped. Trevor leaned forward, his face red. "You're making a big mistake, buddy. You don't know how things work around here." "I'm learning fast," I shot back. "And here's how it's going to work now. You either negotiate a fair lease for the docks, or I start enforcing my property rights." Richard tried to regain control, his voice oily. "Let's not be hasty, Mr. Carter. We're all neighbors here. Perhaps we can come to an agreement." "I'm open to that," I said. "But it starts with you acknowledging my ownership. No more bullying, no more demands. We talk as equals, or we don't talk at all." The meeting ended in chaos, with residents shouting over each other and Richard promising to review the matter. I left feeling a mix of triumph and unease. I'd drawn a line in the sand, but I'd also made enemies. That night, I found a note taped to my door. "Back off, or you'll regret it." No signature, but the message was clear. I wasn't backing down, though. I called Sarah again, and she suggested hiring a surveyor to confirm the property lines. "If they're threatening you, we need to be airtight," she said, "and start documenting everything. Notes, conversations, anything suspicious." The surveyor came the next day, a grizzled man named Hank who'd seen his share of property disputes. As he set up his equipment near the docks, a small crowd gathered, including Trevor, who looked ready to punch someone. "You're wasting your time," he sneered. "The HOA's not going to let some outsider ruin our community." Hank ignored him, methodically marking the boundaries. When he finished, he handed me a report confirming what I already knew. The docks were well within my property line. I thanked him and sent the report to Sarah, who filed a formal notice with the county, putting the HOA on official notice. The retaliation came swiftly. My mailbox was smashed overnight, and someone spray-painted "sellout" on my driveway. I installed security cameras the next day, catching Trevor skulking around my property line at midnight. I didn't confront him yet. Instead, I sent the footage to Sarah, who added it to our growing file. Meanwhile, I started researching the HOA's finances. A friend from my city days, a hacker named Mia, owed me a favor. She dug into public records and found that the HOA was charging residents exorbitant fees for lake access, yet their maintenance budget was suspiciously low. Either they're skimming or they're incompetent, Mia said over the phone. I'd bet on both. Armed with this, I decided to play hardball. I posted a public notice on the community board announcing that the docks would be closed for maintenance until the HOA negotiated a lease. The backlash was immediate. Residents flooded my voicemail with complaints, but a few thanked me, saying they'd long suspected the HOA was mishandling funds. By the end of the week, Richard called, his tone no longer smug. "Mr. Carter, let's meet privately. No need to escalate this further." I smiled, knowing I'd finally gotten their attention. "Sure, Richard. My place, tomorrow. And bring your checkbook." The meeting at my cabin was tense from the start. Richard and Marjorie arrived alone, leaving Trevor behind, probably a smart move, given his temper. They sat stiffly on my couch, eyeing the lake through the window like it was a prize they'd already lost. "Let's cut to the chase," I said, sliding a draft lease across the table. "You want to keep using the docks? You pay rent. You want lake access? We negotiate terms. And I want full transparency on your HOA fees." Marjorie's lips pursed. "This is extortion." "No, it's business," I said. "You've been using my property for free. That ends now." Richard leaned forward, his hands clasped. "Elliot, we're a tight-knit community. If you push too hard, you'll alienate everyone. We're prepared to offer a modest annual fee for dock access, but your demands are unreasonable." I laughed. "Modest? I've seen your financials, Richard. You're charging residents thousands for lake access you don't even own. Where's that money going?" Marjorie's face paled, but Richard recovered quickly. "Our finances are none of your concern. They're when you're profiting off my land," I said. "Here's the deal. $10,000 a year for the docks, plus a percentage of lake-related fees. And you open your books to an independent auditor." They balked, but I held firm. After an hour of back and forth, they agreed to a temporary lease while we worked out details. It wasn't a full victory, but it was a start. As they left, Richard's parting words carried a veiled threat. "You're playing a dangerous game, Elliot. Not everyone here is as reasonable as me." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The lease brought in enough to cover my mortgage, and the auditor's report confirmed Mia's suspicions. The HOA had been funneling lake fees into miscellaneous accounts, some linked to Richard's personal investments. I shared the findings with a few sympathetic residents, who started a petition to oust the HOA board. But the threats didn't stop. My tires were slashed, and someone tried to hack my security system. I caught it all on camera, and Sarah filed for a restraining order against Trevor, whose late-night prowling had become a pattern. The community was splitting. Some residents saw me as a hero, others as a villain. One evening, Dave from the docks knocked on my door. "I'm with you," he said quietly. "A lot of us are. The HOA's been bleeding us dry for years. Just watch your back." I nodded, grateful for the ally. As I stood on my porch, watching the sun set over my lake, I realized this fight was bigger than me. It was about standing up to bullies who thought they could control everything. And I was just getting started. The air around Lake Serenity carried a chill that had nothing to do with the crisp fall weather. My temporary lease with the HOA was in place, but the tension in Serenity Shores was thicker than ever. The auditor's report had lit a fuse, and whispers of the HOA's financial misdeeds were spreading like wildfire. Residents were divided. Some saw me as a troublemaker, others as a liberator. My security cameras caught more than just Trevor's late-night prowling now. Shadowy figures lingered near my property line, and I found tire tracks in the mud near my driveway that didn't match any of my neighbors' vehicles. I wasn't sleeping much. Every creak of the cabin made me jolt upright, expecting another act of vandalism. But I wasn't backing down. With Sarah's help, I'd filed a lawsuit against the HOA for unauthorized use of my property, seeking back payments for years of dock usage. The auditor's findings were our trump card, showing that the HOA had pocketed lake fees while claiming they were for community upkeep. I was ready to expose them, but I knew it would come at a cost. One morning, as I sipped coffee on my porch, Dave from the docks pulled up in his pickup truck. He wasn't alone. A woman with gray-streaked hair and a no-nonsense expression stepped out, carrying a thick folder. "Elliot, this is Clara," Dave said, his voice low. "She's been keeping tabs on the HOA longer than anyone." Clara didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I've lived here 20 years, she said, thrusting the folder at me. "This is everything I've got on Richard and his cronies. Bank statements, meeting minutes, even some emails I acquired. They've been skimming for years, and they'll do anything to keep it quiet." I flipped through the folder, my eyes widening. There were records of unexplained transfers, payments to shell companies, and even a photo of Richard meeting with a man in a suit at a diner outside town. "Who's this?" I asked, pointing to the stranger. Clara's lips tightened. "No idea. Showed up a few years ago, right when the HOA started pushing for more control over the lake. I call him Suit Guy. He's not local, but he's got pull. Richard gets nervous around him." I thanked Clara and Dave, promising to keep their involvement quiet. The folder was a goldmine, but it also raised questions. Who was this Suit Guy, and why was the HOA so desperate to control the lake? I sent copies of the documents to Sarah, who was thrilled. "This could blow the case wide open," she said over the phone. "But we need to be careful. If they're this deep in, they won't go down without a fight." The fight came sooner than expected. That afternoon, a sheriff's deputy knocked on my door, serving me with a cease and desist letter from the HOA. They claimed I was interfering with community operations by closing the dock for maintenance and accused me of defamation for spreading falsehoods about their finances. The letter demanded I withdraw my lawsuit and surrender lake control, or they'd countersue for irreparable harm. I laughed, but it was a nervous laugh. The HOA was playing dirty, and I needed allies. I called a meeting of my own, inviting the residents who'd supported me, including Dave and Clara. We met at my cabin, a small group of 10 squeezed around my dining table. There was Clara, Dave, a retired teacher named Helen, a young couple named Priya and Sam, and a few others who'd grown fed up with the HOA's overreach. "We're with you, Elliot," Priya said, her voice firm. "They raised our fees last year to fix the docks, but nothing got fixed. Now we know where the money went." Helen nodded. "They've been bullying people for years. My husband tried to fight them once, and they made our lives hell, fines, inspections, you name it. We can't let them win." I laid out my plan. We'd use Clara's evidence to bolster the lawsuit, rally more residents, and demand a public vote to replace the HOA board. But as we talked, a loud crash interrupted us. I ran outside to find my mailbox shattered again, this time with a brick painted with the words "Last Warning." The group fell silent, fear flickering in their eyes. "This is getting out of hand," Sam muttered. "What if they come after our families?" "They won't," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. "We stick together, and we don't back down. They're scared because we're on to them." That night, I installed floodlights around my property and set up a motion-activated alarm. I wasn't just fighting for the lake anymore. This was about exposing a corrupt system that had preyed on this community for years. But as I lay awake, the image of Suit Guy lingered in my mind. Who was he, and what did he want with my lake? The lawsuit was gaining traction, but so was the HOA's retaliation. My driveway was hit with more graffiti, and someone cut the power to my security cameras. I replaced them with battery-powered ones, but the message was clear. The HOA wasn't just fighting in court. They were waging war. Clara's folder became my obsession. I spent hours poring over the documents, trying to connect the dots. The shell companies linked to the HOA's accounts had names like Serenity Holdings and Lakeside Ventures, but their addresses led to P.O. boxes and dead ends. The photo of Suit Guy was my only lead, but it was grainy, taken from a distance. I needed more. I reached out to Mia, my hacker friend, again. Can you dig deeper on these companies? I asked, emailing her the details. And see if you can ID this guy in the photo. Mia called back 2 days later, her voice tense. Elliot, this is bigger than you think. Serenity Holdings is tied to a real estate developer in the city, some big shot named Victor Grayson. He's got a reputation for buying up rural properties and turning them into luxury resorts. That guy in the photo looks like one of his fixers, a guy named Paul Whitaker. He handles Grayson's dirty work, intimidation, payoffs, you name it. My stomach churned. So the HOA's working for this Grayson guy? Maybe, Mia said, or they're in over their heads. Grayson's been eyeing lakefront properties in this area for years. Your lake is prime real estate. If he controls the HOA, he could pressure you to sell. I thanked Mia and hung up, my mind racing. The lake wasn't just a community asset. It was a gold mine for someone like Grayson. The HOA's aggression made sense now. They were pawns in a bigger game. But why hadn't they approached me directly with an offer? The answer came the next day in the form of a sleek envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a letter from Lakeside Ventures, offering to buy my property for $2 million, well above market value. The letter was signed by Paul Whitaker. There was no mention of the HOA, but the timing was too perfect. They were trying to buy me out before the lawsuit could expose their scheme. I showed the letter to my allies at our next meeting. Clara's eyes narrowed. That suit guy's play. He's trying to scare you into selling before you dig up more dirt. Then we dig faster, I said. We need to prove Grayson's behind this. If we can tie him to the HOA's fraud, we can take them all down. Priya suggested we go public. Post about this online, she said. The community's already buzzing about the lawsuit. If we share this letter and Clara's evidence, we can turn more residents against the HOA. It was a risky move, but we agreed. I created a private group on X, sharing the letter and key documents from Clara's folder. Within hours, the group had dozens of members, including residents I'd never met. Posts flooded in, stories of HOA harassment, unexplained fees, and even a few blurry photos of Whitaker meeting with Richard at the docks. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Late that night, I got an anonymous email from a burner account. Meet me at the old boathouse, midnight. I know about Grayson. Come alone. My gut screamed trap, but curiosity won out. I grabbed a flashlight, my phone, and a pocket knife, just in case, and headed to the boathouse, a crumbling structure on the lake's far side. The boathouse was dark, the air thick with the scent of damp wood. A figure stood in the shadows, their face hidden by a hoodie. You're Elliot, they said, their voice low and raspy. I used to work for Grayson. He's got the HOA in his pocket, and he's not stopping at your lake. There's a bigger plan. What plan? I asked, gripping my knife. The figure hesitated. He wants Serenity Shores, all of it. The lake, the docks, the homes. He's planning a resort, and the HOAs. Helping him push people out. They've been raising fees to force sales. Your lawsuit's a problem, but Whitaker's got ways of dealing with problems. Before I could ask more, headlights swept across the boathouse. The figure bolted, vanishing into the woods. I ducked behind a pile of crates as a black SUV, Whitaker's, I was sure, rolled up. 2 men got out, one of them Trevor. He was supposed to be here, Trevor growled. Find him. I held my breath, heart pounding, as they searched the boathouse. After what felt like an eternity, they left. I slipped back to my cabin, my mind racing. The anonymous tipster had confirmed my worst fears, but they'd also given me a lead. Grayson wasn't just after my lake. He wanted the whole community. The anonymous tipster's words haunted me. A resort. That's what this was about. Victor Grayson wasn't just a developer. He was a predator, using the HOA to squeeze residents until they sold. My lake was the centerpiece, but Serenity Shores was the real prize. I needed to act fast before Whitaker's ways became more than just threats. I called an emergency meeting with my allies, sharing what I'd learned at the boathouse. Clara's face hardened. I knew Richard was dirty, but this? They're selling out the whole neighborhood. We need to go public big, I said. Not just on X, but in the press. If Grayson's planning a resort, people need to know. Helen, the retired teacher, had connections at a local paper. I'll call my friend at the Gazette, she said. She's been looking for a juicy story. This could be it. While Helen worked her contacts, I met with Sarah to prepare for the lawsuit's next phase. The court date was in 2 weeks, and we had enough evidence to bury the HOA, Clara's documents, the auditor's report, and now the anonymous tip about Grayson. But Sarah was worried. If Grayson's involved, he'll have top-tier lawyers. We need to be bulletproof. I spent the next few days gathering more evidence. Mia hacked into Lakeside Ventures' public filings, uncovering a trail of purchases in nearby towns, small properties bought cheap, then flipped into luxury developments. It was Grayson's playbook, and Serenity Shores was next. I also tracked down more residents who'd been harassed by the HOA, building a coalition that now numbered nearly half the community. The Gazette ran the story on a Sunday, front-page headline, HOA Scandal. Developer eyes Serenity Shores for resort. The article detailed the HOA's fraud, my lawsuit, and Grayson's involvement, citing anonymous sources, Clara, and my boathouse tipster. The fallout was immediate. Residents flooded the HOA office with demands for answers, and Richard canceled the next board meeting, citing personal reasons. But Whitaker wasn't done. The night after the article dropped, my cabin's windows were smashed, and a fire broke out in my shed. I caught it early, but the message was clear: back off. I called the sheriff, who took a report but seemed skeptical. You're stirring up a lot of trouble, Mr. Carter, he said. Maybe you should settle this quietly. I wasn't settling. Instead, I doubled down, organizing a town hall at the community center. Over 100 residents showed up, some angry, others desperate for answers. I stood at the front, holding up the Lakeside Ventures letter. This isn't just about my lake, I said. It's about your homes. Grayson wants to turn Serenity Shores into a playground for the rich, and the HOA is helping him. We can stop them, but we need to fight together. The crowd was split. Some cheered, others shouted me down, but the tide was turning. By the end of the night, we had enough signatures for a recall vote to oust the HOA board. Richard and Marjorie tried to shut it down, but the residents weren't having it. The vote was scheduled for the following week, right before my court date. The night before the vote, I got another anonymous email. Check the boathouse again. Evidence. Against my better judgment, I went back, this time with Dave as backup. Inside, we found a USB drive taped under a bench. It contained audio files, recordings of Richard and Whitaker discussing plans to neutralize me, including bribing the sheriff and hiring Muscle to scare me off that I sent the files to Sarah and the Gazette. The next day, the recall vote passed overwhelmingly, and Richard, Marjorie, and Trevor were out. A new board, led by Clara, took over, promising transparency and an end to the HOA's shady deals. But the real battle was in court. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed. Sarah presented our case like a maestro, laying out the HOA's fraud, Grayson's involvement, and the audio evidence. The HOA's lawyer, a slick city type, tried to dismiss it as hearsay, but the judge wasn't buying it. When Whitaker took the stand, he squirmed under Sarah's questioning, unable to explain the recordings. The judge ruled in my favor, awarding me back payments for dock usage and legal fees. More importantly, he ordered a criminal investigation into the HOA and Lakeside Ventures. As we left the courthouse, I saw Whitaker slip into a black SUV, his face pale. Richard and Marjorie were nowhere to be seen. Back at my cabin, I stood on the porch, watching the sun set over Lake Serenity. The fight wasn't over. Grayson was still out there, and the investigation would take time. But for now, the lake was mine, and the community was free. Dave clapped me on the shoulder. You did good, Elliot. Welcome to Serenity Shores. I smiled, but my eyes stayed on the lake. Somewhere out there, Grayson was plotting his next move, and I'd be ready. The victory in court felt like a weight lifted, but the air around Lake Serenity was anything but calm. The new HOA board, led by Clara, was working to untangle years of financial mismanagement, but the community remained on edge. Residents whispered about Victor Grayson, the shadowy developer whose name now hung over Serenity Shores like a storm cloud. The Gazette's expose and the audio recordings had forced his fixer, Paul Whitaker, into hiding, but I knew better than to think Grayson was done. Men like him didn't retreat, they regrouped. My cabin, once a symbol of my fresh start, now felt like a fortress. I'd upgraded my security system with motion sensors and reinforced locks, but the late-night noises, branches snapping, gravel crunching, kept me on edge. The anonymous tipster from the boathouse hadn't resurfaced, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they were still watching, waiting for the right moment to reveal more. Clara called me one morning with news. "We found something in the HOA's old files," she said, her voice tight. "It's about your property. Can you come to the community center?" I drove over, the lake shimmering under a gray sky. Clara was waiting in the center's cramped office, surrounded by stacks of dusty binders. She handed me a yellow document, its edges brittle. "This is from the original land survey, back when Serenity Shores was developed in the 70s. Your property wasn't just a random plot. It was the heart of the original estate." I scanned the document, my pulse quickening. It described a sprawling estate owned by a man named William Carter, who'd built the first cabin on Lake Serenity. The land, including the lake and the strip where the docks now stood, was his private retreat. The HOA had formed later, when the surrounding land was subdivided, but the lake remained under Carter's control. "William Carter," I said, frowning. "That's my grandfather. I never knew he owned this place." Clara's eyes widened. "You're kidding. This changes everything, Elliot. The HOA's been claiming the lake based on a forged easement from the 80s. Your grandfather never signed it over." I sat back, stunned. My grandfather had died when I was a kid, and my family rarely spoke of him. I vaguely remembered stories of cabin by a lake, but I'd assumed they were just nostalgia. Now it seemed the lake was more than property. It was a legacy, and the HOA had been stealing it for decades. Why didn't anyone tell me? I asked, more to myself than Clara. "Probably because the HOA buried it," she said. "Richard's father was president back then. They must have known the easement was fake, but pushed it through to control the lake." I left the community center with the document clutched in my hand, my mind racing. This wasn't just about Grayson anymore. It was personal. My grandfather's legacy was at stake, and I wasn't about to let it slip away. That night, I had dug through my attic, searching for anything tied to my grandfather. Buried in a dusty box of my mother's old photos, I found a journal, its leather cover cracked with age. The pages were filled with William's neat handwriting, detailing his love for Lake Serenity. He'd bought the land in the 60s, dreaming of a quiet life away from the city. But there were darker entries too, notes about greedy developers circling his property, offering bribes and threats to force him out. The final entry, dated a year before his death, read, "They'll never take the lake. It's my heart, my home. I'll protect it, no matter the cost." I closed the journal, a lump in my throat. I'd come to Serenity Shores for a fresh start, but now I felt like I was finishing my grandfather's fight. The next day, I called Sarah and shared the discovery. "This is huge, Elliot," she said. "If we can prove the easement was forged, the HOA's entire claim collapses. And if Grayson's tied to the original fraud, we can go after him too." But Grayson was already making moves. The Gazette ran a follow-up story, hinting at a new development proposal for Serenity Shores. It didn't name Grayson directly, but the details, a luxury resort with private docks, matched his playbook. Residents were spooked, and my ex-group buzzed with theories. Some thought Grayson was bluffing to drive down property values. Others feared he'd buy out the weaker links in the community. Then came the break-in. I was out meeting Dave at the docks when my security app pinged, showing two figures prying open my back door. I raced home, but they were gone by the time I arrived. The cabin was trashed, drawers emptied, paper scattered. The only thing missing was my grandfather's journal. Whoever took it knew exactly what they were looking for. I called the sheriff, but he was as useless as ever, muttering about kids pulling pranks. Furious, I reached out to Mia. "Can you trace Whitaker's movements?" I asked. "He's got to be behind this." Mia worked her magic, pulling GPS data from a burner phone linked to Whitaker. It placed him near my cabin the night of the break-in. "He's not working alone," Mia warned. "There's another number pinging the same location, a local one. Could be someone in the community." The betrayal stung. I trusted my allies, but someone was feeding Grayson information. I tightened my circle, sharing the journal's contents only with Clara, Dave, and Sarah. We agreed to keep the forged easement under wraps until we could use it in court. But the clock was ticking. Grayson's resort proposal was gaining traction, and whispers of a town council vote to approve it were spreading. Late that night, I got another anonymous email. They know about the journal. Meet me at the boathouse. 1 a.m. Bring backup. I forwarded it to Dave, and we headed out together, armed with flashlights and my pocket knife. The boathouse was eerily quiet, the lake reflecting a sliver of moonlight. The tipster was there, still hooded, their voice barely a whisper. Grayson's planning to burn the journal, they said. He's meeting Whitaker at the old mill tomorrow night. Stop them, or you lose everything. Before I could ask more, they vanished into the darkness. Dave gripped my shoulder. This is getting dangerous, Elliot. You sure you want to keep pushing? I looked out at the lake, picturing my grandfather's words. I don't have a choice, I said. This is bigger than me now. The old mill sat on the edge of Serenity's shores, a crumbling relic from the town's logging days. Its weathered beams loomed like a skeleton against the night sky as Dave and I crept toward it, our footsteps muffled by pine needles. The anonymous tipster's warning echoed in my head. Grayson was planning to destroy my grandfather's journal, the key to proving the HOA's fraud. If we could catch Whitaker in the act, we'd have leverage to stop Grayson's resort once and for all. We hid behind a stack of rotting pallets, watching the mill's entrance. A black SUV rolled up, its headlights cutting through the fog. Whitaker stepped out, carrying a metal box, followed by a man I didn't recognize, tall, silver-haired, exuding authority. Victor Grayson himself. My heart pounded. This was no longer about proxies. The big fish was here. They entered the mill, and we followed, slipping through a broken window. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint smell of gasoline. Whitaker set the box on a table, pulling out my grandfather's journal. This is the last loose end, he said, his voice echoing. Carter's got nothing without it. Grayson's voice was cold. Burn it, and make sure the fire looks accidental. We can't afford any more slip-ups. I signaled Dave, and we moved closer, hiding behind a rusted machine. My phone was recording, capturing every word. But before I could decide our next move, a board creaked under Dave's foot. Whitaker's head snapped up. Who's there? Panic surged, but I stepped out, hands raised. Just me, Whitaker. And I heard everything. Grayson's eyes narrowed, but he didn't flinch. Mr. Carter, you're persistent, I'll give you that. But you're out of your depth. Am I? I said, holding on my phone. I've got you on record planning to destroy evidence. And I know about the forged easement. My grandfather's journal proves it. Whitaker lunged, but Dave stepped in, brandishing a tire iron. Back off, he growled. Whitaker froze, his eyes darting to Grayson, who raised a hand. Let's not be dramatic, Grayson said, his tone infuriatingly calm. Elliot, you're a smart man. Name your price. The lake, the cabin, sell it to me, and you walk away rich. I laughed, bitter and sharp. You think this is about money? This is my grandfather's legacy. You and your HOA puppets have been stealing it for years. I'm not selling. Grayson's mask slipped, revealing a flicker of anger. You're making a mistake. This town will be mine, one way or another. Not if I have anything to say about it, I said. The community's onto you. The Gazette's running another story tomorrow, and the sheriff's getting a copy of this recording. You're done. Whitaker snarled, grabbing the journal and a lighter. Before he could act, Dave tackled him, sending the journal skidding across the floor. I dove for it, tucking it under my arm as Grayson shouted, Enough! We're leaving. They bolted for the SUV, but not before I caught a glimpse of a third figure in the shadows, someone watching from the mill's upper level. The tipster? I didn't have time to find out. Dave and I raced back to my cabin, the journal safe. I uploaded the recording to Mia, who sent it to the Gazette, and Sarah. The next morning, the town was in an uproar. The Gazette's story, complete with excerpts from the recording, exposed Grayson's plan to torch the journal and linked him to the forged easement. The sheriff, under pressure from the public, arrested Whitaker on charges of breaking and entering. Grayson, however, was nowhere to be found. His SUV was gone, and his office in the city was shuttered. The town council meeting that evening was packed. Clara presented the forged easement, backed by my grandfather's journal. And the council voted unanimously to reject Grayson's resort proposal. The new HOA board passed a resolution recognizing my ownership of the lake and docks, with a fair lease agreement for community use. As I stood on my porch that night, the lake reflecting a starlit sky, I felt a strange mix of relief and unease. We won a major battle, but Grayson was still out there, and men like him didn't give up easily. The tipster's identity nagged at me. Who were they, and why were they helping me? Dave stopped by, a six-pack in hand. "You did it, Elliot," he said, cracking a beer. "Your grandfather would be proud." I nodded, but my eyes stayed on the lake. "It's not over yet," I said. "Grayson's still out there, and he'll be back." Dave clapped my shoulder. "When he does, we'll be ready. This is our home now." I smiled, but the weight of my grandfather's journal in my hands reminded me of the fight ahead. Lake Serenity was mine, but protecting it would mean staying vigilant. For now, though, I'd earned a moment of peace, and I was going to take it. The calm after the town council's vote felt fragile. Clara's new HOA board was auditing budgets and cutting fees, and the docks were open under a fair lease. Residents began to see me as an ally, but Victor Grayson's absence worried me. His silence was too calculated. My grandfather's journal anchored me. One entry haunted me. "There's power in this place. They'll come for it, but they'll never understand it." The lake's pull felt deeper than beauty, and I sensed Grayson knew it too. The anonymous tipster was my biggest mystery. Their tips had saved the journal and exposed Grayson, but they'd vanished. I posted in the X group, asking for a meeting. No one came, but a note appeared under my door. "Check the North Shore oak tree. Tonight." Clara and Dave joined me, wary of a trap. At the lake's edge, we found a rusted box under the oak's roots, containing letters, photos, and a key. The letters from my grandfather William to a woman named Evelyn spoke of love and protecting what's hidden. A photo showed them by the lake, her face familiar. "Evelyn Harper," Clara said, "a recluse who died years ago. She was close to your grandfather." A note in Evelyn's handwriting read, "For the vault. Keep it safe." Headlights flashed. Whitaker's SUV. We hid, then fled to my cabin. I called Mia, who dug into Evelyn. "She was a geologist," Mia said. "She and your grandfather found rare minerals under the lake in the 70s. Valuable, but environmentally risky. The vault likely holds their survey. Grayson wanted the minerals, not just a resort. Clara urged going public to protect the lake, but I needed the tipster's identity. I left a note at the boathouse. "Who are you?" The reply, "Evelyn's daughter. Mill, midnight. Alone." At the mill, Lila revealed herself, her face like Evelyn's. "Grayson threatened my mother," she said. "The vault's under your cabin." A gunshot cut her off. Whitaker fired, and I tackled Lila behind a crate. We ran, bullets splintering the mill's walls. We escaped the mill, hiding in the woods until Whitaker's footsteps faded. Lila, shaken, said, "He'll kill for that vault." At my cabin, we barricaded the door. I called Clara, Dave, and Sarah. Lila explained. Evelyn and my grandfather hid a survey of rare earth minerals under the lake to prevent ecological damage. Grayson wanted the fortune beneath. Lila pointed to a trapdoor in my basement. The key opened a steel door, revealing a safe with reports, maps, and a letter. "The lake is a trust. Protect it." The reports confirmed the minerals' value and risks. Sarah said, "We file for protected status. Grayson can't touch it." My security app showed Whitaker's SUV circling. I called the sheriff, who finally agreed to act. Clara rallied residents, who formed a barrier around my cabin. Whitaker and Grayson arrived. "Hand over the vault," Grayson demanded. Clara stepped forward. "The lake's protected, and the sheriff's coming." "Leave." Sirens wailed. Whitaker raised his gun, but Dave and residents tackled him. The sheriff cuffed Whitaker and detained Grayson, who denied everything. The vault's contents and Lila's testimony sealed their fate. Sarah filed for protected status, and the state approved it, barring development. At a community barbecue by the docks, Lila shared stories of Evelyn and William. "They'd be proud," she said. Holding my grandfather's journal, I felt the lake's strength. The fight had forged a community, and we'd won. Grayson was gone, but others might come. Serenity Shores was ready, together.